everyone. Welcome to the Shannon Joy Show. I am Shannon Joy. We are broadcasting live from YouTube on week 3 of the new Shannon Joy Show. We also are connected on Facebook and Twitter, so please find me. My Twitter handle is at the Shannon Joy Show, and you can find me on Facebook at the Shannon Joy as well. So I'm looking forward to a great day. We have a lot to discuss today. I have Laura Jean, who is my momentator. She is in the house.
Hey, hey.
She's here. Also, Courtney is helping me produce the program. Hey, Courtney, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Interacting with all of you as you comment. I want to welcome all of you to, this is, I think it's day 16 since we were, separated from the radio station that we used to broadcast from. And so now we have been working diligently over the past couple weeks to establish a new flagship station here in New York, but also to keep the radio program going, because there's a lot happening in the world today. And I know a lot of you depend on me for news and information, and also the truth when it comes to analysis about the political news of the day. It is Tuesday, and we're moving into the Christmas season. Everyone is getting that holiday fever, and it's that time of year when you just want to forget about politics, right? You're so sick of the Republicans and the Democrats that you just want to forget about all of it, enjoy the season.
And then it's Christmas dinner where you have to discuss with your family.
Right, and then you have to discuss it at Christmas dinner. But the saga continues in Washington, D.C., and even though we aren't paying attention right now necessarily to what's happening on Capitol Hill, they are working very diligently to deliver to us a Christmas stocking full of legislative coal, and that's one of the topics that we've been touching on over the past couple weeks. So today in the program, I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on this radio program and the work that we're doing to establish that flagship station. And I'm also going to talk to you about 2 news items. We have the news just yesterday that Justice Kavanaugh, the latest Supreme Court nomination he was nominated and confirmed over the summer months. No one can forget the confirmation hearings for Justice Kavanaugh. Well, it turns out that he has betrayed his pro-life conservative base already. It took him a hot second to get onto the Supreme Court. He has aligned with the liberal justices in a very important case that affects the funding of Planned Parenthood at the state level in terms of Medicare funds. So we're going to touch on that today. We're also going to talk about the new bromance between Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, and Donald Trump. That's right. As Chief of Staff Robert Kelly moves out of the White House, we are going to see a new search by Donald Trump and his administration for a new chief of staff. And there are reports that Mark Meadows is a strong favorite for that position. And so we're going to talk about the implications of that. I also want to get your feedback and your comments on yesterday's show. We discussed a whole host of topics, but primarily the merger between The Blaze and CRTV. And the question is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'd love to hear from you guys. Courtney, how do we look on the feed?
It's buffering a little bit, but I think as long as we're off our Wi-Fi, we're good.
And now, do we have any viewers, and who has popped on here so I can say hello?
We have Dave.
Hi, Dave. How are you? Welcome to the program. I'm glad you're here.
Michelle Keller.
We have Michelle. Hey, Michelle. Welcome to the broadcast. I'm glad that you're here today.
The Zippy crew.
Of course, Zippy. Ask Zippy how his heart is doing. I know that his blood pressure goes up when he watches the program. Zippy, I'm so glad you're here. If you guys, any of you who are watching right now, if you could please just share this out to all of your friends and family, to any of your political groups on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, also Twitter. I would so appreciate it as we begin to build this program from the ground up on the internet using social media. It really is a slog. It is a diligent daily endeavor to continue to grow that audience. For those of you who are just with me for the first time, I had a radio program on terrestrial radio about 3 weeks ago. Everything was going fine, and we were unceremoniously terminated. Our contract was terminated. It was surprising. I think it had a lot to do with my criticism of the GOP and also President Trump from the right, and so that has been, quite a trial and a difficulty But, the day after that happened, it happened on a Saturday morning. We were up and running on Facebook with a Facebook Live right after. So we have continued in the past 2 weeks since the termination of the show on terrestrial radio here in New York State. I was on 10 stations across the region and a flagship in Avon, New York. We have kept the content going. So I'm doing everything I can, working as hard as I can, really for the past 2 weeks to exhaust all of my contacts here locally and also nationally so that we can find a new terrestrial home for this radio show. So we have our advertisers secure. Those advertisers that I had secured with my radio program are ready to go, and it's just a matter of waiting for the next step. And so, this has been a kind of a tough week because, the first week was so intense and it was there was so much controversy and everyone was so upset about the canceling of the show that kind of pushed me through, and the adrenaline, working 18 hours a week, being on the phone, 24/7. That was really my life for the past 2 weeks. And this week it's just kind of quiet, right? Like I've laid in all kinds of, avenues for this program. I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of people about next steps for the program. And I think we're very close to securing a flagship here locally. But it's just a lot of waiting. And that's kind of, I think, what the Lord is trying to teach me this week. For those of you who know, I'm a devout Christian, and my faith is stronger than ever, even through these trying times. But I think right now the Lord really is teaching me to wait. And sometimes his plan doesn't occur when you want it to occur. And so, and I think also for me, there's a sense of urgency. I know for a lot of you, there's a sense of urgency to get established and to kind of figure out where I'm going to be going in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or month. And so everyone else in the world doesn't feel that sense of urgency. So I want things to happen immediately. Everything always happens a lot slower than I'm comfortable with, but I just want to ask you guys for all of your prayers for me as we now move into the quiet season, the season of waiting, as we look to try to save this radio program. Also, be patient with me, guys. I'm so thankful for those of you who have donated to the program, for those of you who have done angel investments and sponsorships and purchased subscriptions on my website as gifts for your friends and family. I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for really carrying me through this month. I could not have survived financially if it weren't for you, and you guys are absolute angels. I want you to know that I'm working as hard as I possibly can to make this transition and to end up with a viable radio program that is in a position to earn a living for me so that I can support my family along with my husband, the devastatingly Dr. Joy, but also continue to honor the commitment that I made to you as an audience that will stick around. And so please just be patient with me and know that I'm working as hard as I possibly can. I'm not sure where this is going to go. I'm doing everything I can to get this show up and running by January, but if I can't pull it off, please forgive me because I'm doing the best I can. Courtney, do we have any questions or comments?
Yes, we have. It's a political question.
Okay.
From the Zippy Crew.
Hey, Zippy Crew.
Okay, the question is the ambassador to the UN a relevant, important position? Is Heather N a good pick? Shouldn't we just quit the UN?
So, Zippy, the UN is essentially a global infrastructure. This is where everyone who would like to establish a massive global government, this is where they convene. And anything that happens in the UN is not necessarily good for United States sovereignty. So, I have no idea why the United States is involved with the UN. I have no idea why we're the number one funder of the United Nations. And the UN ambassador is largely a figurehead position. They don't have an enormous amount of power, but it does lend an enormous amount of gravitas. And you can see this with Nikki Haley, right? Her position as UN ambassador has elevated her in the minds of the American citizen, and actually it's setting her up for a presidential run potentially in 2020, depending on what happens to President Donald Trump, or potentially in 2024. So make no mistake, Nikki Haley is using her position as UN ambassador to really bolster the foreign policy bona fides that are necessary for a presidential run. And so yes, it's a huge position. I have no idea. I didn't even know that they had nominated someone or he had appointed someone. So I'll look into that, Zippy. Thanks for the question. Any other questions or comments before we get started?
Not really.
All right. So if you could go on to theshannonjoy.com and push this website and this YouTube out to your friends and family, that would help me. If you want to find me on Twitter, my handle is at The Shannon Joy Show, or you can find me on Facebook as well. On Wednesday, so that is tomorrow, we are going to be doing a Facebook Live broadcast rather than a YouTube broadcast. So you guys are going to have to find me on Facebook Live. I'll make sure that I do a quick broadcast here so that we can send you guys the link. So we will be on at noon tomorrow, and we'll probably switch over to Facebook at around 12:05. So you guys can follow me over there. I want to make sure that we are able to push this out to my social media audience because that's the largest audience that I have. And right now, YouTube is still blocking us from embedding on Periscope and also on Facebook Live. So I want to make sure that we retain that Facebook audience. That's why we're going to do this broadcast from Facebook tomorrow. But you can meet me here and we'll all migrate over together. So let's get to the first topic of the day, Justice Kavanaugh. This from Reason magazine. It was all over Twitter and Facebook. Sadly, it really wasn't covered in conservative media where you would think it would be covered. But this is from Reason magazine, which is a libertarian-leaning news organization. Newly confirmed Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh sided with the court's liberal wing in declining to hear cases regarding two states' efforts to defund Planned Parenthood. This is a huge blow to the pro-life community. This is a huge blow to all of the pro-life organizations and politicians that supported not only Justice Kavanaugh, his nomination and his confirmation, but also who supported Donald Trump, who has promised his constituency for many years, starting with his election, that he would nominate pro-life judges. Remember, the first promise made by President Donald Trump and Republicans was that they would defund Planned Parenthood via the budget. They have betrayed the pro-life community on that front multiple times, 5 or 6 times. Multiple spending bills have continued to fund Planned Parenthood to the tune of about $500 million per year. In total, it's $1.5 billion. This is a huge betrayal from Republicans, from conservatives, but also from Donald Trump, who does have the power of the veto. He made a promise to the people who elected him that he would defund Planned Parenthood, and in this situation, he has betrayed that promise. He also promised the pro-life community and evangelical Christians that he would only nominate, say it with me, pro-life justices. And this was the promise made during his campaign. Donald Trump once again betrayed that promise by not only nominating Neil Gorsuch, who is a big blank check when it comes to his pro-life bona fides. He has not ruled on any abortion cases, and so we really don't know where Gorsuch is going to go. But Justice Kavanaugh, and we brought this to you on my broadcast months ago, we told you that Justice Kavanaugh was not pro-life, that he has ruled multiple times saying that not only is Roe v. Wade the law of the land, but it's upheld under precedent upon precedent upon precedent. So we told you, and this was back during the battle between Amy Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh. You all knew, if you were listening to my broadcast, that there were problems with the progressive rhino Justice Kavanaugh. It's no wonder, in my estimation, that Lindsey Graham fought so hard for Justice Kavanaugh, right? Because clearly Kavanaugh is a progressive. Let's go on with the court ruling, again from Reason magazine, and I will post this on theshannonjoy.com so that you guys can read it for yourself. Both Louisiana and Kansas have been trying to block Medicaid funding from going to Planned Parenthood. And just recently, yesterday, Justice Brett Kavanaugh sided with the liberal justices in deciding to not hear the case. The most recent efforts came after the 2015 release of a series of videos that anti-abortion activists say show Planned Parenthood officials discussing the sale of fetal tissue for profit. Actually, it wasn't. Reason is kind of a, I mean, they're libertarian, but I don't necessarily know that they're pro-life. There are multiple examples in the video that was put out that show Planned Parenthood negotiating body parts for procurement in their abortion mills. And so this was a huge scandal. It was devastating for the American community to understand and realize that not only are taxpayers funding the murder of babies in Planned Parenthood clinics on a daily basis, but that Planned Parenthood clinics are also profiting and building revenue streams on the sale of fresh baby parts. So hearts, livers, it's disgusting when you see some of the price lists that come out. It was revealed that the later in gestation, so the older the fetus, the more expensive the body parts, thus giving Planned Parenthood counselors and abortionists an incentive to delay an abortion procedure into the second or third trimester so that they can obtain body parts that are more fully developed. I mean, all sorts of just gruesome details that are not disclosed here in this Reason article. But this is what really jump-started the state efforts. Those states that have pro-life governors and legislatures jump-started their initiative to defund Planned Parenthood at the state level, because how possibly could you justify sending money at the state level to an organization engaged in this type of gruesome business? Again, how can you justify to your pro-life constituents and your religious constituents whose taxpayer dollars are going to fund not only abortion, but also the procurement of body parts for profit? How can you justify that to your constituents as well? And so this resulted in the states filing briefs so that they would be essentially set free from the federal mandates and have the ability to not fund Planned Parenthood at the state level. And this is something that pro-life advocates who carry water for President Trump have been saying for years. I've gotten in many Twitter wars with pro-life advocates who have said, you know what, it doesn't matter that they didn't defund Planned Parenthood at the federal level. Donald Trump wrote an executive order that made it so that states could defund Planned Parenthood at the state level. And all of the big pro-life websites ran big fat headlines. Donald Trump helps the states in the ability to defund Planned Parenthood at the state level. And there were multiple stories about that. And essentially that led to the misconception among the pro-life community that Donald Trump had helped in the defunding of Planned Parenthood. We see now that never happened, right? Even if the executive order was written, the states haven't been able to execute it because they're being blocked by the lower courts. This was the point of the Supreme Court brief. This is why the states brought it to the Supreme Court, so that they could, appeal those lower court rulings. And it would make sense to me if the Supreme Court could rule on Roe v. Wade in terms of forcing states to provide abortion services for women, then why couldn't they, rule on this state issue as well? And so in order for the court to grant the petition, 4 justices would have needed to agree to a hearing. Only 3 did. Justice Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch. The rest denied the petition, with Kavanaugh and Chief Justice John Roberts joining liberal justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, and Stephen Breyer. As USA Today notes, the court's decision is a setback for conservatives hoping to defund Planned Parenthood, which is the largest abortion provider in the nation. So again, betrayal after betrayal after betrayal. from the Supreme Court justices down to Congress, and also, you have to lay this at the feet of the President of the United States of America, who was the one who nominated Justice Kavanaugh with the full knowledge and understanding that he had some questionable rulings in the past on the specifically on the life issue. Clarence Thomas issued a scathing dissent. He asks in the dissent, this is Clarence Thomas, so what explains the court's refusal to do its job here? I suspect it has something to do with the fact that some respondents in these cases are named Planned Parenthood. That makes the court's decision particularly troubling, as the question presented has nothing to do with abortion, but these cases are not about abortion rights. They are about private rights of action under the Medicaid Act. Resolving the question presented here would not even have affected Planned Parenthood's ability to challenge the state's decision. It concerns only the rights of the individual Medicaid patients to bring their own suits. Anti-abortion activists heavily favored Kavanaugh's confirmation. They said if Kavanaugh was going to deal a major blow to health care rights during his first session on the court, this would have been the case to do it. And so Lila Rose has commented on this. She is of Live Action, a pro-life advocate. This is a big deal, according to Lila Rose. Several states that defunded Planned Parenthood are being forced by lower courts to give millions in Medicaid money to Planned Parenthood. Gorsuch, Thomas, and Alito dissented, saying that the SCOTUS should hear the case. That's the Supreme Court of the United States. Thomas asks if the refusal to hear it is due to special treatment for Planned Parenthood, and this is in response to the political story. The Supreme Court turns away Planned Parenthood defunding cases. So I want to hear what you guys have to think about this. To me, no wonder Lindsey Graham fought so hard for Kavanaugh. It makes me think that the entire Kavanaugh hearing was a sham. It was kabuki theater, WWE wrestling, that the Democrats always wanted Kavanaugh to be confirmed. The Republican rhinos always wanted Kavanaugh to be confirmed. And everything that we saw and hear and heard during that time was fake. It was fake. And, this was a comment by Jesse Kelly, who is a radio host out of D.C., and he said, the life of a conservative, go to war. And remember how everyone went to war. Conservative groups, pro-life groups went to war for Justice Kavanaugh. And according to Jesse Kelly, the life of a conservative, go to war for someone against the leftist hordes who tried to destroy his life, only to have him screw you over the first chance that he gets. In addition, this is not the only Supreme Court ruling that Justice Kavanaugh made. To the dismay of many in the MAGA crowd, many in the Trump train crowd, Justice Kavanaugh also ruled yesterday that you can indict a sitting president. So this was a Supreme Court ruling that really, doesn't do any favors for President Trump. And it's astounding to me. It's astounding to me how President Trump continues to carry water for the very people who stab him in the back and seek to end his presidency. It's something that I will never understand. So we're going to go to some of your comments, Courtney, because you say a lot of people are popping on, and there's a lot of commentary. Laura Jean, I want to get your take as well in just a minute.
The Zippy Crew said, I thought Trump said he was going to pick justices from the list of original lists. I don't think either one of them so far were on the list.
Zippy Crew, you are absolutely 100% right, and that's why my audience is so wicked smart. You guys are brilliant. It is true. There was the Federalist Society, I believe, and these are like the fancy guys who liken themselves to be constitutional conservatives. They put out a list of, quote, acceptable Supreme Court nominees. And Donald Trump, in his campaign, promised to only nominate justices from that list. It turns out that Neil Gorsuch was not on that list, and Justice Kavanaugh was not on that list. So do you see the game here? Do you see how we're being played? Donald Trump, at some point we look like chumps, right?
Yeah.
At some point you have to be embarrassed to defend this president because you look like a chump.
I don't think anybody knows what's going on, though, except for your listeners.
Well, and that's...
Because it's all covered up. Everything's covered up.
Yeah, and this is the other betrayal. So you won't hear about this most likely on Rush Limbaugh. You most likely won't hear about this on Sean Hannity. Most of the big talkers are going to ignore this story. And unbelievably, there's a good chance you're not going to hear about this on pro-life websites or from any of the major national pro-life organizations. I usually monitor these organizations in times like this to see if they're going to report. And consistently, March for Life, National Right to Life, and Susan B. Anthony lists, they continue to cover up for this president and continue to carry water for him. And as the GOP continues to betray its pro-life conservative base on a daily basis with now 5 or 6 major budget bills, but also the refusal to nominate and confirm conservative pro-life Supreme Court justices, it's unbelievable to me to see organizations like Live Action, like March for Life, like the National Right to Life. It's amazing for me to see them spending money campaigning hundreds of thousands of dollars for Republicans in districts across the United States of America as recently as this last election, dumping your money, your donations that you give to these organizations that you trust to tell you the truth. Again and again, they continue to betray their constituencies by lying to them about what is actually happening. And here we now have the Republican Party and Donald Trump, and now these Supreme Court nominees aiding and abetting the slaughter of babies in Planned Parenthood clinics across the country. It is no different, absolutely positively no different than the tenure of Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, and quite frankly, George W. Bush. Any other comments?
Yeah, so Eddie
go ahead.
He said, how can the states be compelled to comply with the court's orders while states are not compelled to abide by federal law on aiding and abetting illegals, aka sanctuary cities?
Because we are lawless. That is the answer. The law, if you think about it, Eddie, and thank you for the question, we are buried as Americans under hundreds of thousands of pages of statute at the federal level, the state level, the local level. They pass volumes of legislation.
People are buried under the Kardashians.
Right. Most people are buried under the Kardashian. And so, Laura Jean, do you mind?
Yes.
Yeah. Go over. So Laura Jean is sitting to this side of me, and every time I want to look at you, and it looks weird. So I sit right there so I can see you. Again. I keep doing the swivel, and that's distracting for all of you guys. So, so here's the thing, Eddie. There are so many laws, and in the situation we have today, we are untethered from our Constitution, untethered from our Declaration of Independence, and really in a lot of ways lawless. Like I said, volumes and volumes of laws. Nothing has any rhyme or reason to it. And essentially, the progressive elites are pushing forward whatever they want. And it really doesn't matter what precedent is. It doesn't matter what the statute says. They're going to act in a political fashion. And this is the politicization of the court system. Daniel Horowitz warned me a few months ago. He said to me, the problem here with Justice Kavanaugh is not that he made a bad ruling. It's that he refused to hear the case. And Daniel Horowitz warned me a few months ago. He's like, that's going to be, now that the district courts and the circuit courts, the federal courts, now that they're doing all of the dirty work, you're not going to see the Supreme Court moving anymore. You're going to see the Supreme Court step back, and this will be the battle cry of conservatives, as a good thing. Oh well, we've been complaining about the Supreme Court, legislating from the benches, and now the Supreme Court is allowing the states to get away with it. But the only reason the Supreme Court is abstaining from these is because they've already established these federal courts and just stacked them with liberal progressive judges. One of the best resources on this topic is Daniel Horowitz, a Conservative Review. So I want to direct all of you to his podcasts and also his columns on Conservative Review and The Blaze. He wrote a book called Stolen Sovereignty, which is excellent, and it talks about the corruption of the federal court system. And so, that's where we are. Laura Jean, what are your thoughts on the Kavanaugh decision? Did it surprise you?
No, I think nothing surprises me at this point. I feel like as conservatives, it's one letdown after another.
Yeah.
But I guess what's most disheartening to me is that Nothing's not reported on.
Right.
I mean, you know, here people are like, oh, Fox News, or oh, I'm listening to this great conservative talk show host. They're not telling us anything. They're not telling us the truth.
Well, and this is why I go to Thanksgiving dinner, and you know, I grew up in a conservative Christian household. We are all Republicans. We've always all been Republicans. We agree on everything politically in terms of ideology and ideas. Half my family loves President Trump, and half of my family can see through the shenanigans. And but this is why what you just mentioned, Laura Jean, is why when I went to Thanksgiving dinner, my mother said to me, but I thought Donald Trump defunded Planned Parenthood. There are conservative, and these, my family, they pay attention. They watch Fox News. They listen to talk radio. They try to keep appraised on the news of the day. And even, you know, folks who are paying attention and trying to get the truth are being fed just blatant falsehoods. And a lot of it is by omission, right? So some of the big talkers are going to lie by omission. They're just not going to tell you about it. They're going to distract you with squirrel stories. So you're going to hear about Russia. You're going to hear about the NFL kneeling gate. You're going to hear about Pocahontas and her DNA. They're going to complain about the liberal media. They're going to complain about college professors. They're going to complain about Nancy Pelosi, all the while covering up for the president, who is working with them in tandem to preserve and expand the agenda of President Obama. It's the craziest thing. Mm-hmm. I do sometimes feel like I'm living in an alternate universe with this. Courtney, do we have any comments or questions?
Michael said, I supported Kavanaugh, and when Collins gave her speech, I knew it would be bad. Eddie said, Kavanaugh sent a warning flare before his confirmed hearing with the Roe versus Wade was settled law. The signs were there.
Yes. Precedent upon precedent upon precedent. Yeah. And this is the problem with the conservative movement and conservative media today. If you listened to my radio program at that time, you knew exactly who Kavanaugh was, because we were telling you the truth about who Kavanaugh was. We were reading his, some of his opinions. We were researching his statements. And so my audience knew exactly what was going on. And so no one in my audience is necessarily surprised by this. I'm not surprised by this at all. I knew this was going to happen because I read the words of these people, and I believe that they're...
Well, and I think you're dead on with Kabuki Theater. I think that was fully exposed to me when my husband worked on March for Our Lives.
Yes.
And saw how each side worked hand in hand to promote this event that made it look like it was run by the children, which it fully was not. It was full Hollywood producers were promoting the event.
Yes.
And so both sides of the aisle were lockstep working on this event.
So we're talking about the Kabuki Theater, and I made the assertion in summer of 2018 that the Justice Kavanaugh hearings were a complete show, that everything was essentially scripted. And we know this because the outgoing Justice Kennedy, there was a report, I believe, in The Hill that confirmed that Justice Kennedy chose his own replacement. There were backroom deals that were made regarding Justice Kavanaugh long before we ever saw his nomination or the confirmation hearings. And so there was an agreement among the elite in the unibrow, Republicans and Democrats, that he would be the confirmed next Supreme Court justice. Everything surrounding that hearing was fake, in my opinion, and the leadership at least. Now, I'm not saying that Justice Kavanaugh was in on this. I'm not saying that everyone was in on this. I think that there's a lot of manipulation going on there. I believe that his emotions were real and that they were true. But the movers and the shakers, the Mitch McConnells and the Chuck Schumers and the folks who are in the leadership positions in the Senate, I believe, cut that deal with the president long before we ever had the circus sideshow. And the circus sideshow was designed like every other circus sideshow that we're subject to. It's designed to distract you from what happened. What happened last summer at the same time that this Justice Kavanaugh circus was occurring? It was the minibus betrayal bill. This was the grand poobah. This was the continuation of President Obama's agenda. It was a massive spending bill. It funded Planned Parenthood. It funded Common Core. It funded DACA amnesty. It funded Obamacare. It funded nearly every Obama initiative. And no one reported on this. Why? Because conservative talk radio and conservative media was reporting 24/7 ad nauseum on Justice Kavanaugh. And conservatives were expending valuable political capital to defend a pro-choice justice. This is why we look like chumps. This is why conservatives need to get shrewd and wake up and stop being Charlie Brown with the football. At some point, you look like an idiot. And this is going to segue into our next discussion about Mark Meadows, which we're going to get to in a moment. The head of the Freedom Caucus, Mark Meadows, is now looking to align with President Trump as his next chief of staff, and we're going to discuss that in a minute. But first, I want to go to a few of your comments and questions.
So David Leach said the GOP clown show loved the Kavanaugh circus because it gave them a distraction heading up to the election.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are multiple. And this goes to my analysis. For those of you who are new, I am Shannon Joy. I'm the host of the Shannon Joy Show here on YouTube, hopefully on Facebook soon, and Periscope and Instagram, and crossing my fingers. Hopefully we'll have a new flagship sometime soon, but I just have to wait.
Oh my gosh.
And it's really hard to wait. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. Like, there are so many things happening, I can't tell anyone about them, and I just, and I don't know that they're going to happen, and I don't want to get too excited because
positive thoughts.
Will
it into being.
Pray for all of you who are out there. Just pray for this program. A lot of things are happening right now, and I just have to wait. That's what I have to do. But
Dave Drake said we need more educated voters and less political tribalism.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the truth. Let's forget about our political idols, and I think that's one of the problems afflicting our political culture today is that we have just been so divided by D and R that we don't even care what they're actually doing as long as they have the jersey, right? If it's a red jersey and a MAGA hat, you don't care what they're doing as long as you think they're winning, right? But we're losing anyone who cares about discernible policy outcome and actual legislation and actual change. What we realize is that the government continues to grow, the spending continues to grow, the funding of Planned Parenthood, everything that we oppose as conservatives are being emboldened and funded by the very conservatives who pretend to represent us. And so to answer David Leach in his comment about the distraction, this is what I call a squirrel. And this is something that we came up with on the program about a year ago in the Squirrel Report. And essentially, we look at every Wednesday, we would look at all of the stories that are just shoved at you via conservative media, but also liberal left-wing media that just don't matter. The hours and hours and hours of time that pundits and policy hawks should be spending on actual discernible policy outcome, they are focusing on NFL players and whether or not they kneel for the national anthem, focusing on whatever fist fight or fake fight is happening between the conservative and the liberal in the boxes on your TV screen. And all of this stuff, it's just meaningless. At the end of the day, what did we get out of the Kavanaugh nomination? Nothing. Disappointment. At the end of the day, we're getting another progressive liberal Supreme Court justice. And we look like chumps. We got to stop looking like chumps, right? Laura Jean.
I don't know how to say her name. I'm so sorry. Or maybe, okay. Ahsoka.
Ahsoka
Says, so what do we do? The GOP and the Dems have a duopoly. Is that how I say that?
Duopoly, absolutely. Yes. I call it the unibrow, but duopoly.
On DC and state offices, they pretty much collude to keep third parties out. What do we do?
So that is such a great question, and that leads to another major theme of my radio program, and that is bottom-up, inside-out resistance. The idea that Washington, D.C. will reform themselves is becoming very clear that that's impossible. Even the best people, think of people like Mike Lee and Ted Cruz, who go into Washington, D.C. with the best of intentions, who fight like hell for conservative priorities, only to be destroyed and then consumed by the swamp. Even Donald Trump, who went in as the renegade of all renegades, he was going to be the bull in the china shop. He was going to go in there and break things. He was going to destroy Mitch McConnell and destroy the rhino leadership. Remember that, Donald Trump? Does anyone remember that, Donald Trump? He went in and immediately was consumed. So the idea that we can send people into Washington, D.C. to fix it, I think is a fallacy. And the longer that conservative talkers, pundits, political action groups, think tanks, as long as they tell people that the answer is the Republican Party and to elect more Republicans, the longer we will continue to go down this path. The answer is for people to, first of all, recognize the elephant in the room. Recognize that the two parties are one and the same. They might not always have been, but they are now. That's why we call them the unibrow. They used to be separate, and then they've like grown together in this like tangled, awful, disgusting mess. They need a good waxing, right? And so people need to admit that. And that's one of the hardest things. Listen, with an addict, what is the hardest thing to do? To admit you have a problem. And for me, that's been the biggest challenge as a conservative, as a Christian, as someone who aligns myself with principle as opposed to parties or politicians. It's been astounding to me how difficult it is for people to just say those words, that the parties are the same, that the Republicans are just as bad for the most part as the Democrats. And I'm not saying all Republicans. There are probably a few holdouts who want to do a good job, but they can't. They just can't. But the leadership of the Republican Party essentially legislates 98% of Obama's initiatives are in place and expanded. How else do you analyze the past 2 years? And how can you say anything other than the parties are the same? In terms of discernible policy outcome, the parties are the same. Now, you can argue maybe it would be worse with Democrats. I say it wouldn't. At least if Democrats, if we accepted the fact that we were going to lose elections for a couple years, at least with Democrats, we would have a robust opposition. With Republicans, we have, a rebranding of what it means to be a conservative and pitching that to the American people as actually conservative when it's really progressive. So my answer is to first admit we have a problem and then to begin to activate in your own community. So, there are a million things that people can do. We don't all have to do the same thing. Reading your Constitution, reading your Declaration of Independence, beginning to run for local office and state office, beginning to prepare yourself to battle the federal government from the local level. If you're a parent, if you can homeschool your kids, homeschool your kids. If you can get your kids out of the public schools, do it. Put them in a private school. If you're able to run for local office, school board, zoning board, town board.
Even show up at these meetings.
Even showing up at the meetings.
I go to my town board meetings, I am the only person there.
Yeah. And so if you want to advocate, it goes like this. A couple months ago, I was really irritated with Life News HQ, which is a quote-unquote pro-life Twitter handle for lifesitenews.com. And they're one of the entities that refuses to hold President Trump accountable. So they will run glowing headline after glowing headline. Donald Trump is the most pro-life president we've ever had. It's disgusting. And I said to him at one point, this was after the minibus betrayal bill was passed, which secured an additional $500 million for Planned Parenthood. And we went at it on Twitter. We had a pretty robust Twitter debate. And at one point I said to him, all you pro-life, you national pro-life organizations, March for Life, Susan B. Anthony List, National Right to Life, these so-called pro-life national organizations, I said to them, you're all just really bad at your job. If your job is lobbying Congress to push pro-life legislation, then you suck at your job. You would save more babies if you got out of Washington, D.C., went back home, started a crisis pregnancy center in your town or village. You would save more babies doing that than whatever it is you think you're doing in Washington, D.C. And that's my point of bottom up, is that we have to realize that it's broken. It's broken and it has to be fixed from the outside in. This is why I also support Article 5 Convention of States and all of the action that is. I would encourage all of you to read Mark Levin's book, Liberty Amendments. I read it many years ago. It changed my heart when I understood that we don't need those losers in Washington, D.C. to fix it for us. We can do it ourselves by amending the Constitution using Article 5 powers, which were laid out as a safety hatch, an escape hatch by the framers of our Constitution. They understood, and they understood this profoundly in their statement, that when they mentioned a more perfect union, they understood that it was not going to be perfect. Anything man-made can't be perfect, and everything man-made becomes corrupted. And I think that the framers knew that at some point this beautiful document that they put in place would be altered and torn apart over many, many years. And they knew they had to give the American people, short of a revolutionary war, short of violence and mob action in the streets, a way to fix it, a way to check the power of the federal government. That is Article 5 Convention of States, which I should do a program on at some point and have some experts on, because, you know, that's another way for us to resist from the bottom up and the inside out.
It had a lot of momentum. How is it working now? Or is
the momentum always stalls now that, you know, when the idol goes into office and people think that President Trump is going to be their white horse and he's going to come in and save us from the swamp. That's mistake number one. We have to be a motivated minority that is committed to principle, and we need to be activating at the state level and the local level, and we have to continue. And I would say, to start a new conservative movement, it's time to call a spade and find people who will align with you in a principled way. The show that I did last week, I think it was the first show that we did last Monday, I laid out about 20 or 30 sources that I rely on, people who are willing to fight, people who are willing to admit the problems that exist within the conservative movement, news organizations, pundits, talkers. And so I would encourage you guys to go to theshannonjoy.com and pull up my podcast. It was the inaugural show, and that's where I kind of dished with all of you on all of the people that I trust right now. And that doesn't mean you trust people forever. Right? I trusted Ted Cruz for a really long time, and now I don't really trust him anymore because of his votes. You align with people when they're moving in alignment with you, and you move away from people when they are not aligning with you in terms of principle. And that's what we have to get good at doing. We have to become nimble and, really move quickly to find that new movement. But we are building the roots of that movement. And I want to encourage all of you, never give up, ever, ever, ever. It will be okay. Things today are not nearly as bad, most likely, as they were during the founding of our country and the framing of our concept. I mean, good grief, we fought a revolutionary war. It was so corrupt, it was so bad. King George was so tyrannical that we fought a bloody revolutionary war. So listen, this is the nature of fighting for liberty. It's not easy. This isn't romper room. And we have to be shrewd, and we have to never, never, never give up. And you guys know I won't ever give up. As long as I have a voice, I'm going to be fighting for liberty and those principles. Courtney, you say we have some
Yeah, so I have a couple
questions.
Cool comments. Tony Gillette said we must fight within the GOP to move it back to the right. Look at the 1975 speech to CPAC from Ronald Reagan. Bold colors and change.
But it's not happening. So I get it, but it's not happening. The Republican Party is dead, in my estimation, and Christ said that you cannot put new wine into old wineskins. In my estimation, the GOP is so corrupt, they are so decrepit, the power structure is so solidified. Any conservative who goes up with the intention of trying to reform it from within eventually becomes corrupted themselves. I'll give you a few examples. Ted Cruz, Larry Kudlow, Mike Lee, the Freedom Caucus, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, Newt Gingrich. Every single reformer, every freedom fighter, conservative, eventually goes into the swamp. They try to reform the Republican Party from the inside out, and they end up being crushed. Ronald Reagan was the last conservative Republican, and at this point there is absolutely no saving of the Republican Party. In my opinion, that's not to say I wouldn't potentially vote for a Republican if I thought that they aligned with my principles, and I wouldn't give them a shot, but I align, I like the idea of a new second party, whether it's libertarians, federalists, constitutionalists. I love Convention of States. I love homeschooling your kids. Here's the beauty of it. Resisting tyranny is different for everyone. And the key is to find your unique talents and abilities, whatever you have at your disposal, to fight for liberty, and doing it from your own corner of the world. Listen, we don't have the grand plan, and this is something I had to give up a long time ago. Everybody wants a plan. Everybody wants to win. Everyone wants to know, okay, this is what we have to do. That is what progressives do. Progressives scheme and they plan and they lie and they manipulate. What I've begun to learn is that God does have a plan. He just needs people who are willing to accept him and to do their part to fulfill his plan. All you can do is whatever you can do in your own corner of the world. Number one, don't fear. Never be afraid. God is in control. He does have a plan. The Constitution of the United States of America was a miracle. It was an absolute miracle. Anyone who says, oh, well, we don't have the caliber of man today as we did during the, signing of the Constitution. Well, yeah, no, that's just not going to happen. That's not true. God uses all kinds of people, and we need miracles, but we need revival in this country. We need people to fear God more than they fear men, and to begin to activate in every corner. Go ahead, Courtney.
Read the book of Gideon.
Read the book of Gideon. It's a great, thank you, Laura Jean.
Beverly Griffin says, pro-life groups are all about raising money. Where would they be if abortion is made illegal?
Interesting. Beverly says that, and this is the really sad truth that I hate to say, but there are very prominent pro-life leaders, very prominent evangelical leaders who are raking it in. They're making an enormous amount of money, and they're able to look themselves in the mirror because they'll say, oh, I'm doing my best, I'm trying my hardest, and it takes time, and but at some point you just have to wake up, and you have to look in the mirror and say $1.5 billion, almost 1 million babies aborted at the hands of Republicans, conservatives, and Donald Trump.
Katie said, liberty always takes a hit when one party is in charge of all three branches.
Absolutely. But even when they're not, here's the deal. Progressivism marches on regardless of party. They work together. The two political parties are the same. They are one political party. They have a power sharing arrangement, and sometimes they step on each other's, but this is what you see with gerrymandering and redistricting. These are all backroom deals that Democrats and Republicans strike together. Listen, I know I'm from New York. For those of you watching across the country, it takes a New Yorker to know a New York con man and to know the New York con game. And this is, it is so obvious to every New Yorker that we have one political party. It is the establishment, Republicans and Democrats, and they just share power. The Republicans are quite happy in New York State being the opposition party and going back and pretending to be pro-life and pretending to care so much, and we're doing the best we can, and they'll bash Cuomo and they'll bash Democrats, but they won't lift a finger to change anything. They won't take a stand. They have no courage. We have a crisis of courage among our political elite, and until regular people call them out and continue to not allow them to get away with their treachery and betrayal, they'll continue to betray us. We're going to get the same results if we do the same things. Who said that? Ben Franklin?
Insanity. Isn't that insanity? The definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing.
And for me, this is just, it's just so obvious. Yeah. There's not a single, people are like, oh, well, give Donald Trump credit for what he's done. I can't, I get the embassy in Jerusalem. He pulled us out of TPP.
What else?
I'm trying to think. They're like, Supreme Court. Well, we know now that's gone up in flames. Supreme Court judge. That was the real. This is the reason that all the evangelical. There's no wall. There's no wall. The border. Go on to Conservative Review and read up on what Daniel Horowitz is reporting. The border crossings are at an all-time high. We are at Obama levels right now. We have an invasion at our border. The caravan again is a squirrel. That's like a fake story. I think that it was probably manipulated. I'm not even joking. The caravan doesn't matter. We have hundreds of illegals coming over our border every day. The idea that the caravan might show up and then they turned around doesn't really matter. We have a crisis at the border family units are up.
I mean, even Obamacare is alive and well.
Obamacare,
I know for one.
Obamacare fully funded and emboldened, strengthened under President Trump. Common Core emboldened. In fact, it's going to get worse. Common Core. Oh, you just wait, guys. Wait till they merge the Department of Education with the Department of Labor. That will be the 21st century slavery. That will be the workforce for the 21st century, and they'll call it,
make up some stupid name. That
skill-based learning, but it's really, destroying the minds of children so that they are compliant slaves. We'll get into. I'm going to do a show on that because I had some interesting conversations with people on Facebook regarding that merger. Apparently, because Mike Rowe likes it. All conservatives love the merger of Department of Labor, Department of Education. So, and by the way, they're not shrinking either of those departments. This is the other conservative talking point. Rush Limbaugh is going to come on the air and he's going to say, this is brilliant. Donald Trump is going to increase efficiencies by combining departments to make these big fat Uber departments. Well, maybe I would believe that if they were actually cutting funding to both of the departments. But they're increasing funding to the Department of Education and increasing funding to Department of Labor and then merging them, which is worse than what we have today, because then you have, again, consolidation of power among fewer and fewer hands, and this is where you get corruption and tyranny. What do we have? 12:56. We only have about 4 minutes left in the broadcast. I feel better now. This was a hard show to do because, again, you guys know everything in my life is so up in the air right now with the radio show, and I'm waiting on proposals. I'm waiting on decisions. There are so many things that are out of my control right now in terms of the future of this program and whether or not we're going to be able to continue, at least from a terrestrial perspective. And so today I really was, it's sometimes hard to get up and to do this live broadcast because there's so much going on and there's so much uncertainty. And you guys just continue to be such an amazing audience, and your support has been really everything that, aside from my deep and abiding faith in Jesus Christ and as my Savior and my Lord, and really just learning how to give up my life to Him and say, okay, Jesus, take the wheel. Like, I can't control these things, it's not up to me. And this is why I'm so thankful, even in this really awful time. The thing I'm most thankful about is just the strengthening of my relationship and my trust in Christ. And, it's really just forcing me to be humble and to have some humility. And, I think I prayed that the Lord would humble me like a month or so ago. And I don't know why I did. I'm like, sometimes I pray things and I don't know why I pray them. And I'm like, well, you certainly have, Jesus. Thank you. But so, I appreciate all of you guys being patient with me, building this show and doing it live from YouTube. I'm learning a million things that are just, not in my wheelhouse. And I'm going to continue to push through, even on the hard days. I promise you guys. I know you will too, because rule number 11 in my rules for resistance, which we have to do a show on that as well, is never, never, never give up. That's the thing. That's what I want to tell you guys. Even when it seems awful and you feel like we have no allies in Washington, D.C., that there's no way out, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, there's no way we can achieve liberty in this country and fight for it again. There's no way that we can, bring justice to the people who are in positions of tyranny right now in D.C. I just want to assure you, just don't give up. Never give up. The framers of our Constitution, imagine the obstacles they faced in going up against the most powerful navy on the face of the planet, right? A couple of ragtag colonists battling King George in Great Britain. And at that time, there is a lot of information about how that battle was waged really by maybe 10% of the nation. Most Americans, they weren't Americans at that time, but most of the colonists didn't really care. They could have lived under King George. They could have lived under a constitution. They really, they were just busy with their lives. Nothing today is different than it was back then in terms of human nature. And this battle for liberty was fought on the periphery. The 10% factions on either side, the tyrannical factions and the liberty-loving factions. These are the folks who wage these battles. And right now we have the same value. It's of equal import. And no, we're not fighting with muskets or cannons on a battlefield, but we're engaging in the battle of the mind, winning hearts and souls. That's the battle that we're in right now. And I firmly believe that there is spiritual warfare happening right now, and that's why we really do need to be. That's why I say we need revival first. We need a population of people, probably no more than 10 to 15% of activated activists in this country, all connected, finding each other, who fear God more than they fear men, and are willing to go up against these institutions that are profoundly corrupted, both political parties. We can do that. If the colonists could do that, if the revolutionaries could do that, then why on earth? We have fought world wars, we have fought cold wars, we have fought revolutionary wars, civil wars, and yeah, today it's different. It's not a war, it's not bloody, but let me tell you, all of these same elements are at play. It's just they're using deception and manipulation instead of outright warfare. And that's a tactic on purpose, by the way. That was the progressives 100 years ago said, it's icky to murder people. And they think highly of themselves, progressives. And they saw what happened with the communist revolutions, and they saw what happened, with some of those bloody revolutions. And they said, we have access to information, and we have the ability to manipulate people. I mean, we can put these things in place without ever firing a cannon, without ever engaging any of that icky warfare. And so they've been engaged in the battle for the mind over the past 100 years. And as conservatives, we just refuse to understand it. And so that's what we need to do. I mean, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but I'm just a girl with a YouTube radio show from the Christmas bunker. I want to thank all of you guys for being with me today and for joining me for the program. Do we have any other comments that you guys think are interesting? We're going to pop out in just a minute here. We good to go? Mm-hmm. All right. Mm-hmm. Thank you all for being with me today. Again, please push this out to anyone and everyone you know. Go to theshannonjoy.com if you appreciate what we did here and you want to support my show. Currently, I am 100% listener supported. So there's no income coming in for my family, and all of your donations are appreciated. In addition, any subscriptions that you want for commercial-free on-demand podcast listening, you can go to theshannonjoy.com and subscribe. It's $2.99 a month or $24.99 a year. For those of you who are angel investors, it's a one-time donation of anything over $100, and you get a lifetime subscription with that. So thank you guys so much. We will see you tomorrow right here. We'll all migrate over to Facebook together, but we will see you again tomorrow right here. Mark your calendars, noon tomorrow Eastern Time for the next round of the Shannon Joy Show. Have a great day. We're still going. You guys are still here. We're still going. We're waiting. What is it? Buffering? Mm-hmm. Well, how do I shut it down? Oh my goodness.
My goodness, this says wait 10 seconds.
This is so strange.
Stop the encoder.
Stop the encoder?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to stop an encoder. So is anyone watching? Do we have an audience? So we are waiting to end the program. I don't know how to stop the streaming. So I am right now looking at my computer. Should I just turn the computer off? Would that stop the streaming? I think it would. All right. So rather than stop streaming, so let's just try this again.
Did you turn off the OBS?
I'm so shiny today too.
No.
I keep looking. I thought that maybe there would be an easy way to like do that, but you just can't.
Did you stop the OBS?
I can't. It's streaming. All right. Well, guys, we're just gonna turn the computer off because I think that's gonna work. So, peace out. We'll see you tomorrow. This is what happens when you learn how to be a broadcaster on the fly out of your dining room at the Christmas bunker. You guys are the best. You're so patient with me. All right. We'll see you later. Let me just turn this down. If I can't turn my computer off.